Hi, Dr. Kannaganti. Welcome to the show.
Hello.
It's great to have you on here.
It's wonderful to be here with you.
Thank you for joining.
So we're going to start off with kind of just learning a little bit more about you. We would love to hear this. This episode is really going to focus on the death and dying process and a lot of your personal experience in the countless hours you have working with patients in this area. And we'd love to just start off hearing a little bit about you and what got you interested in this type of work.
I'm going to just enter this field with some gratitude to be able to step in and share this with you. I also want to offer gifts of gentleness, of love, in this really extraordinary time we find ourselves in, and to offer to whoever is listening that if what I am saying, if the words feel too conceptual or abstract, or even too based in conclusion and opinion, to release that and to let it go and simply receive the tone, the love, whatever is coming through, receive that. What got me into this work, when Will and I first met, we had lunch somewhere in South Boulder, and I said, "You want to play?" And so it doesn't feel like work to me. I think that I'm a sculpture in the making, then the maker is just chiseling off the extra bits until it turns into full-on play. And it's strange to call end-of-life work play. But, I've come through being a researcher, a scientist, med school, family medicine, more holistic and integrative in nature, through the help of mentors, into this incredible field where I feel finally at home. It is sacred. I get to say love a lot, and I get to practice love a lot, shamelessly. And this is the field where, in medicine, where we're really blessed to practice consciousness. There's this amazing poem by Rumi. It's called The Worm's Waking. This is how a human being can change. There's a worm addicted to eating grape leaves. Suddenly, he wakes up. Call it grace, whatever, something wakes him. And he's no longer a worm. He's the entire vineyard, and the orchard too, the fruit, the trunks, a growing wisdom of joy and wisdom that doesn't need to devour. And this is play. That's the field of play. And each day that I engage in this field, I feel more and more intimately engaged in a conversation with the divine. And I have tears coming, so that must be so true.
As a fellow physician, coming up in the Western model, this devouring that you're talking about reminds me of the aggression
Yes.
that we have toward disease, what we call disease and illness. And
Yes.
it sounds like you're pointing toward, in the work that you do, a very, very different way with people. I wonder if you could share more about what that's like for you.
it's incredibly intimate. And you both know this because you're in a very intimate field yourself, and you made that choice to move towards that. Hospice is so blessed that it's a team working for a team. And in the rest of medicine, one can't help but feel the separation that is the root of human suffering, right? But end of life care, whether it's palliative or hospice, and it really magnifies in hospice, is a team of us with nurses and physicians and nurse practitioners, chaplains, social workers, CNAs, volunteers, and others, administrators, right, who are so important, the infrastructure, working with not only a patient, but also their family and other beloved ones. And pediatricians know this, those of us who go into peds or med peds or family medicine, we're taught that the patient on their own is not the unit. And it's incredibly beautiful to engage with that. So when I step into what feels like the field with the patient and their family, there's this little butterfly effect. When I touch with love a piece of that unit, that team, everything else shifts, and it's amazing to see that. And so I enter every situation carrying an extraordinary amount of love that doesn't feel like it's a learned empathic skill, something else that I can't name that comes through. And as you know, there's so much grief in this care, so much loss, and grief isn't always pretty. It's got hatred and division. It's got misunderstanding, hostility, anger, rage. We're seeing it on the streets right now. And to be able to step in and to meet that with enormous courage and vulnerability changes everything.
Yeah, I am hearing just the profound sense of this undefinable love that seems to move through the process. And it has many forms, is what I'm hearing.
Has so many forms, yes.
Has so many forms. And
it's radical inclusion, right?
Yeah. What are some of the big takeaways you have now from seeing so many different processes about death? You've mentioned some of them already, but I'm curious about just some of the big takeaways you now have about your own personal understanding of the dying process.
Yes. There are so many stories, and one always starts in the present moment with COVID, the sense of separation and isolation that people are feeling outside of hospice. Once we embrace people who've come in, suddenly we find a way of connecting people. But even there, we're so limited. Yesterday, I was speaking with the husband of a patient who was in tears because he wasn't able to come into the facility. Meanwhile, without him, she's really dwindling. And the takeaway there with him was entering with him into a place of surrender. This is a hero's journey. That's a huge takeaway for me. And we all enter the hero's journey invited by symptoms or a catastrophic event, life-limiting illness, for instance, COVID, the brutality in the world. And suddenly we have to walk this path. There is no other way than to walk this path. But all along the way, there's a part of us diminishingly along the path that kicks and screams and struggles and resists against it. We need an incredible amount of people to remind us that it's okay, that this is exactly what we need to do. And so with this family member yesterday who I was speaking with FaceTime, I was able to say, can we hold together this reality of what is, even if it's uncertain, even if it's tragic? This is how it's happening. This is how it's going down. And I'm here with you, and I can feel your heartbreak. And ours are as well. And there was, he was in tears. And at that moment, he transitioned from the tightness of frustration and anger into this brokenhearted open space where the light started to come right through. And you know just what I'm talking about. You both of you see that every day in your work. A few weeks ago, a dear friend of mine had a seizure, suffered a seizure, and suddenly he was in the ICU. And turns out he has a brain tumor. And but fortunately, he and I have known each other in the world of meditation. And he said, if I don't stay in the present moment, it's too frightening. And so we had the best spiritual date on the phone ever. We listened to an Eckhart Tolle lecture on dying before you die. There are so many takeaways. There's a few years ago, I started to ask myself, who are the people for whom this end of life is not horror, is not trauma, and why not? What is it about these people that they radiate peace? And I noticed that when the person going through this transmits peace and acceptance, although that if it's not really authentically there, whatever is showing up authentically, that's the most beautiful thing that there is. But these people, I was really curious, when they exhibit this, everybody else shifts around them, and then it's a party. It's a party. It's incredible, and we all keep going there because we want some of that. And I realized that there might be 5. It's iterative. Peace is iterative. That there's 5 stages of embrace, of emergence, and that we encounter the story we tell ourselves about how death cannot be. And including to whoever's listening, my question for you is, in this time of COVID, when we don't know how this virus might affect us, is it okay to die? Is it okay to get dreadfully sick in this way? And there's no right or wrong answer. We encounter our story, and whatever is happening in this moment, we allow it. We start to have open, alert awareness for it. That it's like coming into a new home, a new house, which you don't know. And you take a seat and you start to bond with your surroundings. You start to belong to it. And in that belonging, there is more attachment and attunement, the beginnings of adaptation. And Ayurvedic medicine says that the thrust of health is actually adaptation. And the strange paradox is that we can have cancer and we can have end stage dementia, in which case, we're that example. We don't really have access to consciousness as the rest of us do, but somewhere, COPD, heart failure, that as we start to move into that sense of belonging, that sense of I am here, that the adaptation to that present moment actually makes us healthy, strangely enough. That health is an experience of the moment, how we're experiencing ourselves at the moment in all of our multiple dimensions, right? The physical, the emotional, the social, the familial, the psychological, the emotional, the mental, the cognitive, the wise, and the emergent, and so many more. But and I noticed that as people sit back, they become more co-creative. They start to engage in an empowered way with what's in front of them and speak for themselves. The self-care really escalates. The need, the capacity to ask for one's needs to be fulfilled really increases. And this is where, as a physician, I start to see somebody partner with their own goals of care. Eventually, I noticed that the story dissolves. The original story they came in with about illness and their identity and who they are and a sense of even their own ground starts to dissolve, just like a caterpillar dissolves with its imaginal cells in a cocoon. And they start to become something that they did not expect to become. And this is the beginning of the emergent process. And it's always a continuum. We're all there. And how magnificent it is to start that process before the life-limiting illness hits. Although there's nothing wrong with starting at any time. Sometimes our suffering and our pain and our grief is the opening. It's the opening to the door we've been waiting for.
Do you find that many people face a review of the past, or are many people facing the challenge of what's to come, or is it all of the above? Or
it's a beautiful question of curiosity, right? And I'm still really curious about what goes on. We really don't know physically and mentally what I'm seeing happen. And, your birth and the birth of your siblings, I mean, each of our births is so unique, and so it is with end of life and the death. It's incredibly unique. But it does seem as though that if people have the privilege of time, and many of us don't, we die in accidents or murders, suicides, other very catastrophic sudden events. But when we have the privilege of time, the neuroscience of this shows that there's just when the brain feels threatened with its own survival, there's a way in which there's a simultaneous process of increased protection of certain experiences and a stilling of the brain and an emptying almost. But before we get there, depending on people's childhood experiences, and of course, this is where you as psychotherapists and psychiatrists come in, these experiences of trauma that are unheld. I don't use the word resolve, because resolution makes it seem like it goes somewhere else. It, it's, as you know, it becomes a part of who we are. And any of this that's not held and embraced seems to start to come back up at the end of life. Um, I see immense anxiety and agitation that early on we might call post-traumatic flashbacks. It's as if people are fighting with demons, and even outside a trauma landscape, in the inpatient care center, persons at the end of life, they're in that comatose, unconscious state, and the family wonders, why are they still here? They're done, but they're lingering. And we often share with them that people are likely processing at some level, just softly landing like a leaf falling off the tree, traveling through the space and the air to come land on the ground. And I'm so curious. Other people pass away with a smile on their face. There is often, at the end of life, people tend to look off into one specific point, and when they're conscious enough, they speak about seeing deceased ones. This is a very common theme, staring off. One patient's daughter was watching her mother doing that, and she says, Mom, don't follow the light. Another very common theme is people speak about wanting to go home. And often the people around them, their families, take that very literally. And there is an increasing and great stilling that is fairly stunning. Of course, we've got lots of awareness about near-death experiences, about out-of-body experiences, the light. Lots of people talking about the light. Steve Jobs, his last words at the end of his life were, "Oh, wow, oh, wow, oh, wow." And it really gives me this sense that we may all, or many of us, again, I have no idea. This could be just an opinion and a conclusion that, or wishful thinking, but it may be that we're somewhere between a brain process of shutting down, and all that happens, perhaps an activation of these centers, neurogeek terms, anterior cingulate cortex, the posterior cingulate cortex, the insula, the amygdala, prefrontal cortex, activated in these experiences, and the maybe and not dissimilar, interestingly, to the experience of grief, which is also like a death internally. Maybe there's a rush of serotonin, increasing happiness. Maybe there's endorphins. There's no research that I've found around that, but this is all incredibly fascinating and humbling. We don't know. And as much as we speak of consciousness, we don't really know what that is. We don't even know what a thought is. Can I dissect your brain and find a thought? So yes, the curiosity of what goes on for people, the life review, the settling in, the stilling, the emptying. It's profound and really beautiful to be witness to that, and kind of addictive from the viewpoint of it bringing me back to my heart.
It's palpable, the depth of your care and the sacred way that you hold the process that you get to be a witness and a participant in with these families. And it's been a while since we connected and talked about the practice of medicine, and I'm wondering in the time since we last talked about, because we've talked a lot over the years about the spirituality of practicing medicine. How have these experiences in the death and dying process shifted your perspective about what medicine is, or how? I'm wondering if you could share, with our audience, what if you went back, let's say, to ordinary family practice, what would be different about how you would work with people today, having had these so many profound experiences?
It's a beautiful question, Will. This quote, I want to share this quote by David White, who's also shared love, I think. He says, in refusing our vulnerability, we refuse the help needed at every turn of our existence and immobilize the essential tidal and conversational foundations of our identity. The only choice we have as we mature is how we inhabit our vulnerability, And this is, I was already in that field of awareness in family medicine. It would be even more profound now, because that vulnerability is the day-to-day losses, the day-to-day deaths that are preparation for the great opening, the great emptying. And to really, promote this idea that this is all a hero's journey, and that it's an enormous privilege to walk in, that I want to change, to help change the perception of illness as crisis and emergency, the military model of medicine that we're really seeing right now, from emergency to emergence. Huge shift in paradigm. The ABCDEs I spoke about a few minutes ago really came from my looking at the ABCDE of resuscitation in the emergency department for trauma. I want to share with you a poem that came through me with the help of the beloved last night. I called it War and Peace. And this kind of reflects what I want to share with all of us in this time. Our panic is a firehouse. Our panic is a firehouse with words of war. Our panic is a fire hose with words of war. Frontline, heroes, fight, lockdown, danger, rescue, survival, failure, crisis, pandemic, death count, wars within wars, ruptures of humanity. And still, God rises like Maya Angelou, offers warm, buttered chunks of reassurance, medical nectar, iterative ideas of peace. And still God rises like Maya Angelou, offers warm, buttered chunks of reassurance, medical nectar, iterative ideas of peace. It's okay. It's okay. All is well. All is well. We got this. We all got this. Traditional medicine sees death as a failure and illness as a failure. What if it isn't? What if it's exactly what we need in this moment to wake up? To wake up to how beautiful we are, to how amazing we are. One of my favorite teachers, Matt Kahn, says something like, if love is the highest vibration, why not clear everything else from the table of consideration and offer the embrace to the one who's calling out for it?
I often have on these conversations, like all these little doors opening in my brain. And this one is really opening a lot of new doors for me. I've spent a good deal of time contemplating death in my lifetime as a part of the path to
Yes.
waking up. And there's something new for me in the conversation today about really seeing how much, first of all, we avoid the conversation generally in our culture, and how much the mystery of death is potentially something to look forward to, just like the mystery of life. That it's just opening kind of a new doorway to me of like, wow, like the mystery of death is just as beautiful as the mystery of life. And walking through life withholding both to me, sounds like a much more empowering path than walking through life saying, I just want life and I never want death. To me, that seems like a very disempowering path, a very stressful path to live every day, since death can come at any time. So it's just sort of opening that, and I'm wondering about your, like when you work with people and you help them in the process, and like what do you feel is a empowering relationship to this concept of death that is maybe the greatest mystery we'll ever have in our lifetime, is this concept of death? How do you work with people around that, and what do you feel like at this point for yourself is a healthy way to view death?
Thank you for asking that, and thank you for being so beautiful that you're so open to exploring the new undiscovered territory. And let's play. I want to invoke a personal experience because here I am in hospice and end of life care. My father had dementia in the last 6 years of his last 10 years of his life. And also a physician, a pathologist. And I was not his primary decision maker. So I had to very respectfully stand aside, though my own feelings about the end of life is, don't take me to the hospital. Don't intubate. Let it happen naturally and peacefully. And again, there was no right and no wrong. Things unfolded exactly the way they should and the way they did. One of the things that we're finding in COVID right now is that families are separated from their beloveds as the beloveds are passing away. Mm-hmm. And this has been very heartbreaking. And I feel such deep compassion for those who are dying alone in hospitals and facilities, on vents. And without invalidating that experience at all, with the deepest of compassion, I want to offer that this goes on a lot. We're often separated in the way that we live from those that we love who pass away. My father developed multi-system failure in his body from an infection. He just went up in flames. Everything failed. He was taken to the hospital. He was in India and I was here. And my sister was in Florida and another sister in Paris. My mom was with him, and he ended up intubated and alone. And I was communicating with, on text and phone with my aunt, who was sitting next to my mother in a different place. And she said, I think he's declining, or something of the kind. And I immediately recognized what was going on. So I said to her, my sister was on the phone with me. I said, can you please run me down to the ICU and put the phone next to him? She said, he's not conscious. I said, it doesn't matter. He can hear me. And this is the magic and the mystery that I see at the end of life. So she did what I asked. I got on the phone and I shared with him the things that I always share with my patients' families, to share, to say, to speak from the deepest sincerity of the heart. The Dr. K's high five. I love you. Thank you so much for having been my father. You were an amazing father, and I'm so honored. It's okay for you to go. It's okay for you to let go of your body. We're going to be okay. We're going to look after each other. These 5 things seem to be alchemical magic words. Then after I spoke them, my sister, who personally I think was always his favorite, got on the phone and said similar things in her honey tone. She's pure embodiment of honey. And then we thought that the phone disconnected because it went silent. And we didn't know whether to hang on or call back. And then the ICU doc came on the phone and she said, he just passed away. And, it was like, yes, we did it. It is accomplished. And we immediately flew to India. And I have to say that I kind of pretended to cry because I didn't feel any grief. I felt the splendor and the wonder of his completion, and that he was teaching me, and this is something I frequently share with families, is your loved one is teaching you how it's going to be for you, how it could be for you. They're making it okay for you to go through this because you will. And, my father, during his embodied life, was a perfume in a bottle. And that bottle had a pretty close lid on it. He was gentle, but very soft-spoken, rarely ever said anything. It was after he passed away that the communication with him just expanded, and I entered this liminal field with him, this limbic resonance that was so profound. And he has shared with me guidance about peace. The first thing he shared was, he said, seek peace. And I said, what does it mean? Usually it's find peace or rest into peace. Seek seems so active. And several months later, there was another conversation in that field. I'm not delusional. It didn't feel like that, but where I woke up in between sleeping and awareness, and he was speaking of the illusion of solid objects that are bonded together, but he says there is still movement in everything and enormous spaciousness. Therefore, in anything solid, seek the peace that hides in every situation. So profound, so profound. The bottle opened and the perfume is everywhere. And it is so celebratory. There have been other patients for whom every experience was a curious one in this process. I think the last integrative psychiatry conference, I shared the story of this patient who developed brain mets that were progressing very rapidly, and he had gone blind a couple days before I saw him. And I sat next to him, and I said, he didn't know who I was, greeted him, and he was blind. And I said, and I'll call him Gabriel. I said, so dear one, Gabriel, you're blind now. And he said, I know. I can't believe I get to be blind before I die. I get to experience this. Mm-hmm. And everything opened up. Everything opened up for us. And his family was sitting around, and they were following his sense of peace and arrival. And we were sharing jokes and laughing. I shared a really bad joke about the blind dinosaur.
There's a blind dinosaur.
Now I'm curious. Would you like?
What's
to
the joke? It comes from Jurassic Park. What do you say to a blind dinosaur? Or what do you call a blind dinosaur? I don't think he saw us, Rex. And that's the other thing, in end of life, there is so much laughter. There is so much, when in these moments when we're going from the resistance and the suffering of resistance to opening, there's that immediate awakening, and we're all laughing in that miraculous alchemical place. Everything's funny. Sometimes.
I'm feeling a lot of gratitude for you and your heart and the way that you walk in the world, and the example that I feel you provide to other physicians for finding the courage and the grace to simply be with another person in their, I could say, catastrophe, and in their suffering and their everything, every state, with kind of a fierce commitment not to aggress on them, or to bring, to be very aware of your agenda that can come. It's so deeply ingrained in us as physicians to bring our agenda. And one thing I'm really appreciating in this moment is the heightened awareness about the agendas that we can bring. with good intentions, right? But the way that we can diminish from the experience by being unaware of the agendas that we bring.
Right. Daniel Goleman talks about when we don't know what we don't know, that what we don't know, sets the stage. And I think the model of sick medicine, which is simply a stage in our evolution and maturity, not my intention to be divisive or critical. We are simply where we are, but we cause a lot of implicit trauma. We don't realize that our panic and our use of panic language, our use of failure language, can so activate the very, very, very tender, sensitive nervous systems of people.
Yeah, and that obviously creates more obstacles to living well. And wellness in the body is obviously the activation of stress and in the body is obviously not probably the best move for the immune system when trying to deal with some of these forces that we're facing.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
And there is the move that we're already making in medicine. We have moved so far into coming into our own love and humanity, is the movement. I think Dan Siegel once talked about his conversation with his teacher, and he said, "What is the difference between illness and wellness?" And his teacher circled the I of illness and the we of wellness. And we are emerging into the consciousness of we, rather than the I imposing upon another I. And we got this. We all got this.
We like to ask folks on this podcast a final question. I think you answered the question before the question was asked.
Oh, well.
Which, knowing you, I'm not surprised that you have the ability to do that. The question has to do with a billboard that everyone can see. And what would you like, if you could put a paragraph on this billboard that everyone in the world could see, what would you like everyone to know?
I'd like to have everyone know that we're on a hero's journey and that we're all heroes walking this journey, and that we do not walk it alone, that we are profoundly relational, that the reason a table sticks together is because all of those atoms and electrons are in relationship. And this is part of the miracle of our life in this form, is relationality. And we got this together.
Hopefully everyone hears that message. It's a great message to send to everyone. Thank you, Rohini, so much for sharing just very profound wisdom on an extremely, extremely important topic right now to be addressing with everything going on in the world. So thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing what you see.
And thank you both so much for the field that you held with me. so sacred and so sweet and so loving. It just we were talking about a very serious topic, and yet the underlying river was one of joy and curiosity and a welcoming. Thank you.